Joe.
Okay, good afternoon, Carlos.
You ready for another exciting episode of Forgotten Television?
Yeah, these trio of shows they seem to be ramping up in a strong way, and then as we get into our final, I think, look at season 2, we have one of the most iconic of all the episodes, if not the most popular.
It's definitely tackling some big issues this time, and then even bigger ones next time. So I'm excited about it. Excited to revisit our young friends from Carver High.
Yeah, and we have some really particular 80s kind of Cold War stuff in these episodes.
Very true. And we actually have a Minnesota Twins sideways reference in this
I was going to bring that up. Yep,
yeah.
I was going to bring that up, that warms the cockles of my heart.
It does to hear a childhood hero, but let's get into it. We are in season 2. We are talking about episodes 19, 20, and 21. And we're starting out with one called Out at Home, which aired on February 19th, 1980. Are the faculty or the athletic department at Carver High, we see them all in a room, and they need a new head of the athletic department. They don't call it athletic director.
Something to that effect, yeah.
And they're talking about it. At no point is Ken Reeves lobbying for the job.
No.
He is very much Lyndon Johnson in 68. He's not seeking it. But by election, by acclamation, the faculty have selected Ken Reeves to run the athletic department. And they start hitting him with the requests right away for what is needed for their particular teams.
Yeah, and how that kind of affects is that after school one day, and I can't remember if this is I don't think it's an episode where Ken's car breaks down, but I think that happens in one of these episodes. He's invited to dinner and to watch the Lakers or the Bulls, I can't remember, at cable at the baseball coach's house.
Yes.
Ken Reeves is very reluctant to go.
Yeah. And this is at Charlie Pop Brady is the, grizzled, ornery old baseball coach at Carver High.
Yeah, and gym teacher it sounds like.
I think that Miss Pringle's going to get you in the classroom one way or another. So it sounds like everybody in the athletic department has to teach some gym.
And Ken intimated that he thought that he would be the great fit for this role that Ken gets. And then the guy sort of resents him.
Yes.
Ken, because he got it.
Yeah, he feels like Ken snaked him. Like Ken's like, oh, you should go for it. And then, And then, of course, this is somebody that is something as an older guy that I fight actively to not be that guy that thinks that can only see the bad outcomes as bad breaks in life and doesn't acknowledge the good breaks. So this is another example of, that's because his buddy's the principal. That's why Ken Reeves got it. Otherwise, if it was based on merit, it would have been me.
Yeah, and then there is a little tension between the principal and our good friend, the baseball coach, and that was played out too as well. But Ken went to bat for him, and
Ken did his first. He actually, even before the athletic director, Ken is like going to the team. It's like, hey, what do you guys do in the spring? You consider playing baseball? And they're like going, I don't get out of bed for the kind of money baseball players make. And Sir Ken Reeves refers to childhood hero of us in Minnesota, Rod Carew, saying Rod Carew makes $800,000 a year.
Yep, and I was just like 79. Would he have been a twin or an angel? He'd have been an angel.
He'd have been an angel. Yeah, he wasn't making $800,000 a year from Calvin Griffith. No,
that's right.
But it was like a wow. And then I started thinking, like 79 to now, what's a great player make a year now? Maybe 50 million. A really super great.
Yeah.
So that's 50 times in 50 years. I'm like, that's inflation, but that doesn't seem crazy. But
and this is the time that Nick, or as he's known as New York,
yes,
sort of takes center stage a little bit. And he's playing stickball or teaching them how to play stickball. And he tries to, and generally it seems like likes the baseball coach.
I'm wondering if people even, because I only know stickball third hand, right? Because I didn't grow up in a city. I never played stickball, but in media, there's been enough portrayals about in a busy street, we play stickball, and there's the very famous picture of Willie Mays stopping by someplace in New York playing stickball with the players. but I never saw it growing up. And the thing is, I just wonder if your kids, if you asked your kids what's stickball, would they know?
No, not at all. And I mean, for us, it was off the wall, right?
Yeah.
That was our closest thing to stickballs. We'd have balls, regular bats, and in a little south of where you are, we'd go to Lenox because they had this big fence, or we'd go to Aquila School and knock the ball around that way. But I think that was the portrayal of a stick, and whatever ball they got was a socioeconomic kind of a thing too.
Yes. Yeah. That it was, and very much so, because in New York City, no park. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, which actually isn't true. You could do an entire series just on New York City parks, but that was the other thing, is blacktop jungle, right?
Yeah.
You had to play where you could play. And I tossed football. We played football in the streets when I was a kid. That was part of life, right?
Yeah, and they would go to car. And be like, why is this street so busy?
Yeah,
it's that kind of thing.
Exactly. Why are there cars on our playground? Like, my cats look at me like, going, "Why are you putting stuff on my dining room table?"
Yeah, and there's one of the lines that when New York or Nick is talking with that coach about Brooklyn, is something I remember to this day, is when he says, "Oh, my old man was a fan of Brooklyn," and I believe the coach says, "Oh, he likes the Dodgers, or like he's a friend of the Dodgers," and the guy says, "Oh, the LA Dodgers? No, it's for my old man. It's only the Brooklyn Dodgers."
The Dodgers, yep.
And that's one of those things I remember most distinctly from the show. But the first time I've heard about the heartbreak of those Brooklynites.
Oh yeah. That's something that, unless you were exposed to baseball of the 50s, you wouldn't know. You wouldn't know about the heartbreak of New York fans losing their beloved bums from
Dodgers. Yeah, it was Ebbets Field for me is just something I see in documentaries, right?
Yes, Ebbets. You know what? Ebbets Field and the Field of Dreams to me are both these imaginary things, right? You know what I mean? It's not. Let me ask you this, because this is a tangent, but I feel like I need to talk to somebody about it, because there's something that exists that I do not know if it's a joke or not, and I think it's real. Are you familiar with the Ocho?
Oh, ESPN, the Ocho?
Yeah, the Ocho. So it's like, when it started off as like a joke in a Saturday Night Live bit, but I think it's like a real channel now. So they do like wiffle ball and all kinds of, and I'm like going, stickball could be on the Ocho.
There you go. I know that, remember the Saturday Night, the ESPN, the Ocho, but wasn't it also in Dodgeball too?
Dodgeball, that's where it came from. It was invented in Dodgeball, but there is now I was watching the other day, there was a Dodgeball was on TV.
Oh, okay.
I kid you not. There is wiffle.
I've seen wiffle ball.
And it's kind of, they played something called roof ball, which is you had to throw a football up on a roof and then catch it as it was coming down from the roof. And it was these old drunk guys, and they're doing it in someone's front yard, and they're broadcasting it.
Yeah, so, 24 hours news cycle.
So I think that the Ocho is art imitating life. I don't know.
Yeah, that could be. I haven't personally. I don't know if I've ever been to
the thing is, channel. I'm a creature of habit, and I usually don't scroll that far down on my channel.
That could be. Yeah,
I'm not a college football aficionado, so I have like the bottom third of my YouTube TV directories at the bottom, and I never get down there. So maybe I should dig for the Ocho.
Yeah, I think I know plus we don't get into this as the wrong venue about streaming services and that nonsense. But
I think it actually may merit an episode at some point, because that's one of the challenges that we have in finding future episodes, is what is available.
Yeah,
because a lot of these ones just die, and that's the sad thing is. And so they get a life on YouTube that nobody really takes the time to kill, because no one's losing any money.
Yeah,
you know what
exactly.
I mean? Because it's not like I was either going to spend $20 on Amazon or I was going to steal it. You know what I mean? It's just like you can't find all the seasons. Season 3 never went out on DVD.
Yeah,
the only place you can get season 3 is on YouTube. The only
from
place.
Old Soul.
I think that's worth a discussion at some point, because that's a frustration, as it's almost a library kind of problem, right? It's like it's like we're losing some of the archival history, and nobody's archiving this stuff except for archive.org. So once again, I think it'd be an interesting topic to discuss.
Indeed. I do have a question for you about this episode.
Yeah.
When the old ball coach got so mad that he's decided to quit, and Ken was in charge of setting up interviews
Yes.
for his replacement. There was the person who interviewed for the job. Do you know what actor that was?
I do not, but this is the guy who was very hippy dippy, like.
Yep.
Yeah,
yep.
Man. Whatever. Who was it?
I let them get their own karma going or something.
Yeah, man. I don't push them.
So I thought it was Arsenio Hall, but it was not. But it was somebody I did recognize, which was Meshach Taylor, who was known for designing women. He was the African American. So I said,
okay, that's a good pull.
I had to look that up and just take a look because I was like, hey, that guy's in Reckoning. Unfortunately, he's passed away. He was like 20 years older than us.
Yeah.
So that was, I thought
did
he
not
was a
watch
young
Designing.
guy.
I did not watch Designing Women, but I know exactly who you're talking about. Very iconic character.
Yeah. So that was pretty cool.
Do you have anything else on this first episode?
This episode? No, just that the actor who played the main character here, he had his own series in 73 called Tenafly, which was a 5-episode only cop show.
Wow.
Then he also had a recurring role as Lieutenant Brock in Perry Mason.
Perry Mason, okay.
So then he was an author, and he was quite the
They
guy.
do have, and I find it interesting because at first I was the baseball coach character. Part of his hard luck story is that injuries and the color barrier. He played in the Negro Leagues, which I'm trying to do the math. I'm like going, that makes sense. If in the late 70s he is in his 60s, that the timeline works out. But that's weird to me. One of those in my brain, the Negro Leagues are old timey.
Yeah.
And nobody connected to me in any way can have been part of that. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
And the fact that when we were born, the Negro Leagues were not a generation away from us.
Yeah. And so it was good. But no, I think it helped us get to know New York a little bit.
Yeah.
And sort of the dynamics of the school. And I thought it was.
Yeah. I thought it was a solid episode. And then I think we have now episode 20 of season 2, which I think is the most 80s episode.
It is the most 80s, and it is the most, how shall we put it? I don't want to say it's pro-American, but it just shows how we try to position ourselves against the Russians as being different from them.
And it wasn't quite Draco in Rocky, right? I mean, these were actually far friendlier young men that come to visit America.
Yeah.
And they're stopping a Carver, which I think Ken Reeves says it like that. They're stopping a Carver? Why?
Yeah, you kind of think of it in the back of your mind, right? Just being a suspicious guy who grew up in the 80s, that the Russians wanted to show how clean and suit and tie guys they are against some guys, ragged guys in the and in that vernacular they use almost every episode from the ghetto.
Yeah.
And I thought that these, obviously the premises, the basketball team for the Russians looks like it's 18 are there and they want to play Carver, and it is, but one of the roles is not just a game that the players match up and one takes they go follow them to class, talk with them. And so it's an interesting dynamic where you have some of them that really get along with the players. And then you have someone like Abner Goldstein, who has a lot of bad feelings because he is a Russian.
Yeah. And that's a level of awareness that they do zero explanation.
Yeah.
Zero.
Yep,
Zero.
exactly.
I do not know what I was thinking was happening when I was 14 when this was on, but obviously I knew exactly what was going on.
Yeah.
But Goldstein did not culturally enhance the knowledge of his teammates as to why. But I found it interesting because I knew nothing about international basketball competition, zero.
Oh, yeah.
And so even back then, Olympic basketball was not thought of as a big deal because America owned basketball. And of course, it would never be competitive until the U.S. embarrassed themselves and then they had to have the dream team. But they talk about, international rules. I don't want to play by international rules. And Ken Reeves negotiates like one half one way and one half the other. And I'm like, I can't imagine that those rules would have benefited one team over the other like they make it a plot point. But
yeah, there's one kind of fatal kind of flaw. I'm trying to think of the term that's not true. Is the lane back then was international was much wider than more
wasn't it like a triangle?
Yeah, it was more like
it wasn't a lane. It was
trapezoid.
Trapezoid, yeah.
Yeah, it was more trapezoid where I didn't see Carver painting the lines for.
No, it wasn't as much as we've talked about how Coolidge is a star, and we'll get to see him next week. Be a quote unquote star. He's not living in the paint. Carver is not running the triangle offense.
Yeah, so that was the good, and then the Goldstein thing was good. The one Yiddish word or the one Russian word he used. Yeah. So for kid, that was over my head too, as you say, Carlos.
Yeah.
But Russian dressing, I can still remember that phrase that he talks about, and I thought they did believably well.
Yeah,
the Hayward and the Russian he becomes friends with, so to speak.
Yes. And that was actually interesting. I have a note here to ask you. So he says to Haywood, let me exchange addresses. And Haywood's like, why?
Yep.
Goes, well, so we can write letters. There ain't much for letter writing in. And I was going to say, then my note is, can you remember the last time you wrote and sent a letter?
I can't remember when I wrote a letter, but I remember when I was in the 6th or 7th grade.
Yeah.
5th grade. We exchanged letters with a school like in New Jersey.
Oh, wow.
So you would write a letter and then you'd send it, and they think they send it first as who wants a girl, who wants a boy. It's, well, give me a girl.
Yeah.
So I remember that I had to write a letter to her, and I think it went back and forth a couple times. And then I remember that we talked on the phone once. Oh, and I think I sent her my school picture too as well. But we talked on the phone once. But those are the days when it was a long distance call. You weren't on for very long because
I grew up with my dad's mom in my home.
Yeah,
and so Grandma would be exchanging very long letters. She had this very thin paper, and it would be multi-page. It's such absolutely beautiful penmanship.
Yeah,
something about me you wouldn't know, but in an office setting, I rarely use the whiteboard because I get accused of having serial killer penmanship. So I admire Grandma who could write out in her 80s these handwritten long letters, but it's not. I couldn't tell you the last time I sent a letter like that. I don't remember ever having a pen pal or doing any of that kind of stuff as kids. But this international exchange stuff's a big deal. So I had family. My dad went. My parents are both from Cuba. And my dad, I'm going to tie this together, I promise.
Yeah.
My dad came here, went back because he had a brother who was sick in 89. And I remember him specifically telling me that he was asked, they're like, well, Carlos, what's it like in America? And my dad's like, what's the upside of telling him?
Oh,
that actually, if we want to have meat, we can have it. You know what I mean? We just go to the store and buy it. And so he said it was a lot like this. And so those kinds of cultural exchanges it would help with propaganda both ways, right? I mean, I'm sure that they're taught that America is race riots up and down the street. All of the horrible things that they try to say about American capitalism. Yeah. Similarly, we would say the same thing about what it was like. And there wasn't the mass media like we have now. There was no internet. There was no information. You just didn't know. And so it really was like, I remember, so in 80, right, the U.S. Soviet hockey.
Yep.
Then early in the 80s, the Russian, maybe it was in the 70s, maybe it was before then. I remember on Saturday watching hockey. I know, not a hockey guy, watching hockey. And the Russian team was playing the Flyers. And the Russian team refused to come out for the second period because of the American pro style of violent hockey. They said that's not hockey. And so they refused to come out. And so I'm like going, and that, because it's so hard. I doubt we have a super young audience, but it's so hard to understand the existential crisis that was the Cold War.
Yeah.
Everything in the world was put in the context of either red, Russian or America. You couldn't be neutral. And that's the context. So the Russians are coming is not just, a little exchange program thing. This was a big deal in 1980.
Yeah.
And actually, I'm sure they recorded it before the hocky game, right?
Yeah, I didn't check, but
February 26, 80, this aired. So it had to have, they produced it several months ahead of time. So it had to have been done before the USA-Russia game. So that's fascinating.
But what I think that the show did really well, to be just so pro-American, is Hayward saw the enthusiasm of the guy who actually wants to defect and is baffled by it. Like, dude, I got nothing. And I can't, so he doesn't understand why he would want to do that. But obviously, slowly, Hayward gets it. Hey, who are those guys you're traveling with?
Yeah.
Oh, that's security.
Yep.
And then Hayward kind of switches over in his mind about what's it like he gets an idea of what it means to be free in America versus what it's like for this particular character in Russia. And that was basically what the Cold War is about, was the Western values versus the Eastern.
Yeah. And I firmly believe that you can apply across pretty much any geopolitical conflict. Maybe I'm going to be like the kumbaya guy who ended up on Designing Women. Yeah. But people are people, and 99% of what people want is the same universally. They want a long life. They want happiness. They want to see their kids prosper. You know what I mean? They want to see their grandkids. They want to be able to spend time with them. And I guarantee you can go anywhere on the planet, and the things that make people happy are pretty much similar. And there are people that profit from making people see the differences rather than the similarities.
Yeah. And I think, too, that this show ends with Hayward being distressed about, and is played out many times in a defection situation where the guy gets caught, where he's made to go up in front of the press and say, I want to come back, when Hayward goes, he's lying. He's lying, and nothing anyone can do about it.
And the reality is you don't know. It's like going, okay, yeah, you can go, but your parents are going to Minsk or where, I don't know. I shouldn't talk about when I don't know, but that's leverage that they held over people, right?
Yeah. And it was just, I thought at that time this would have been, they would really have played upon those things. But looking back in retrospect and seeing those things about Goldstein and all that, it was, and not to see the Russians perceived as like the Draco, as you say.
Yeah, they weren't the evil empire or anything like that. They were human beings. Obviously they weren't kids, because nobody's on either side is kids. These are well past school age. We're suspending belief.
Yeah.
I did hit you before the show started with a very, very subsequently famous actor who's played one of the students. Yuri Gagensky is played by Jonathan Gries, better known as a guy who can throw the ball a quarter mile, Uncle Rico from Napoleon Dynamite. And for those that have watched White Lotus, you will also see him as Greg or not Greg, depending upon what season you're in.
I'll have to catch into that, because I've seen parts of White Lotus season 1, but and I have a little tidbit about the main Russian defector. Yeah. He is played by a guy by the name of Chris Mulkey, who's from Viroqua, Wisconsin.
Okay. He's a very similar character actor. I've seen him in a lot of stuff.
Yep. And of course, we love him because he graduated from the University of Minnesota.
Good. He's one of us.
And he acted at the Children's Theater, and he married a Minnesotan actress.
Okay.
They eventually settled in Hollywood, but they made a movie, and I remember this movie, that won a lot of kind of Independent Spirit Awards back in its day, called Patty Rocks. And it is an independent film, and it was filmed, I believe, in Minnesota. Wow, so I remember when it came out. So I'm going to revisit that, because I remember it being I shouldn't say a big deal, but it was something that was played up here in the press at the time. So I think it was from the late 80s.
Okay. We have a bit of an expansion of what I'll call the White Shadow creative tree. You've got a co-writer on this episode by the name of Joshua Brand, who went on to co-create 2 different shows. One of them is a really fun show, Northern Exposure. And I think this is the second or third time we've had a Northern Exposure connection. But also created a show that I watched. I have not seen, but I've heard good things on. It's always been on my watch list, The Americans, which is interesting. This guy obviously likes the Russian spy thriller thing, because he wrote this, and that ends up the theme of the show, The Americans.
I have watched every episode of The Americans.
Okay, so there you go. There's the White Shadow DNA.
There's one of the best first episodes I've ever seen. As The Americans. It's pretty good. So, but that's good. I was unaware. That way, Carlos, I love the research.
Excellent. So we got episode 21, which is a bummer, man. This episode was sad. The Hitter.
Yeah.
And I think this is this may be our first Goldstein-centered episode.
Oh, no. It's
not Goldstein. I'm sorry, Gomez. Centered episode. First Gomez-centered episode.
Other than in the first season, right? He was the gang one, was Gomez-centered?
That's right. Okay, so Go-Go gets a season 2.
You got to love Go-Go's hair, right?
You do. And I always loved his enthusiasm. Go-Go seems very happy-go-lucky kind of guy.
Yep.
But sadly, things aren't going that well for the kid at home. They're noticing that you're losing some fights, Gomez. Basically,
That's right.
in the locker room, they're seeing signs that he's coming on the wrong end of some fights.
Yeah, and it's what I thought they did very well, in a little cleverly so, was that you obviously Gogo wants to hide this, but Reese and him I feel like they're closer in this and Reese kind of intuits this and tries to talk some sense into him about this. Mm-hmm. The Reese is there when the incident happens in the parking lot, so I thought that was a good thing, and I think it also did a good job, and maybe this is just my upbringing, the yin and yang of the great dad, but then sometimes he's this abuser. Yeah. But my one thing that I just didn't remember about it, but I really, and I don't know why I enjoyed it, but was the cockfighting scene.
I found that disturbing. But
this is why I liked it, because I was like, okay, this is 1980.
Yeah.
And there's cockfighting going on, which is not something that I support. But I looked up California law. I said, when did California outlaw cockfighting? It was like, but it was pretty prevalent all the way up and through the 80s, and it's even today in some states.
See, I think here is the thing. There is whatever human thing that makes people really love to gamble. And it's a cheap way to gamble. And there's bloodlust and all kinds of horribleness a part of it. It is one of those things that pulls into some of the ugliest elements of human nature. But it shows that Mr. Gomez has a bit of a gambling problem. Doesn't know how to walk away from the table with money in his pocket.
Yep, and I think that he's somewhat. They try to frame him a little bit as a sympathetic character, where he worked on a ranch in Mexico, but now he can only get day labor work, and that's some of the issue. Obviously, the gambling doesn't help, but
the day labor thing that's real. I remember my dad had a sign shop right on Washington Avenue in the 70s in downtown Minneapolis. There was a restaurant in the building that he owned that was called Maggie Malone's.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
Right there, that was his building, and right on that corner there, that was where back then the word that was used was bums. Homeless hadn't been invented yet, or what's the proper phrase now?
The unhoused.
The unhoused. Either way, the word was used about, and work trucks would come up, and people would. Because a funny story, but my dad and his partners let this old timer kind of sit in our vestibule while you wait for the truck to come by. They started talking to him, and it's like, Mac, I was in the military this night. It's like, you getting your pension? He's like, I don't get nothing. So they took him down to the VA and got him benefits and everything else. And then Mac was like so excited. He's like, I'm the richest man on Washington Avenue. But it was right there. It was right there that the trucks would come in the morning. Yeah. In 2026 in Minneapolis, it may not be the course, but it has been the course of action that those that are in the home repair at Home Depot will have a place to gather workers and stuff. See, to me, that is absolutely noble. Yeah, he's out there hustling, but like anything else, he's a real bad man. Takes the job from him at the job site.
Yeah, and that was the NFL great Bubba Smith played the character. Yes. There was a scene where his dad, Gogo's dad, was picked for the job, but Bubba Smith said, "You go." And so I think Bubba Smith also did those beer commercials back then, right? The Miller.
He's a very large human being, and he said, "You know what? I need this job. I'm taking," because I think there were probably 30 guys there and only 5. Yeah, you only needed 5 for the jobs.
And that day labor thing, that little scene where they're picking guys. That for me is much like stickball for you, and that stick is where I've seen it on TV many times.
Never seen it,
but I've never seen it in real life, right? Yeah. So it was interesting.
So the cockfighting, I think viscerally, I don't know. I don't like people messing with animals. It really makes me angry. But the whole scene, and I thought it was done so well in the parking lot, where you see Reese and Reeves, and like going. They don't get involved, but they're uncomfortable. Reese gets back in his car and goes, and it's like going, what would I do in that circumstance? Gosh, I hope I wouldn't let a kid get beat up by his dad, but I think that the custom, the default would be family's family, and you don't want to get involved in it. But I personally, thank goodness, never experienced or didn't have abuse close to me. But I did see it. I did see it in youth sports growing up. I did see a couple of instances where fathers engaged in physical, hit their damn kids because of what they did on the sports field or didn't do. And it's horrific. And it doesn't really get talked about as much anymore, but it still happens.
Yeah. I have a question for you, Carlos. Maybe because I can't have this perspective.
Yeah.
Obviously, your father grew up in Cuba. That's your heritage.
Yeah.
These are Mexican American.
Yeah.
And there's you and your dad in a sense. I mean, what was that like as someone?
So I certainly had to maneuver the cultural differences, particularly among gender issues. Part of it is that you and I are better trained than our fathers were on what the appropriate and what's not appropriate, you know what I mean, in the workplace and when working with other human beings, particularly females. But multiply the generation gap by 1,000, you have there's a lot of what I saw as ugly machismo. That even as much as I love my father, he's a good guy. I think some of his attitudes about women are not where I am, but I show him grace too, because let me actually give you an example, because this is one of my favorites from law school. Law school, you spend a fair amount of time arguing with people because you think you're the greatest minds in the world. I had this professor in law school by the name of Victor Kramer. Vic must have been in his 80s. He taught civil procedure. Vic had been one of, I feel like I've told you this before. He had been one of Howard Hughes's attorneys.
Oh, no, you haven't told me this.
He had clerked for the United States Supreme Court for Felix Frankfurter. This guy was old. He was in his 80s, long past. So he, in law school one time, said, yes, at the Justice Department. And he went, Justice Department. The sign says, man's greatest pursuit is justice. I always thought man's greatest pursuit was woman. Whatever. An 80-year-old guy makes a joke, right? If I make that joke, come after me, but leave him alone. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I try to sow some grace for generations. So to answer your question, I don't feel like I saw physical abuse in Hispanic households anymore or any differently. Yeah. But certainly the chain of command was very gender-based, and Cuban men very loudly were in charge. I don't necessarily know that they were always in charge, but they were always left to believe they were in charge. Yeah. And you don't disrespect the breadwinner and this and that. So there's a lot of the cultural things that I saw in there.
Yeah. I just want to think if that was that a fair portrayal? Was that any sort of, they picked that student, they picked that ball player because he was?
I don't think so. I didn't feel like, other than maybe the cockfighting, right? Yeah. And I don't necessarily, I think, this is my think. I think that 50 years ago, I can see that someone from a rural Mexican area, that's an activity that was normal for them. You know what I mean? You can't look back at stuff 50 years later and say, what a bunch of weirdos, right? You got to put it in the context. Beyond that, I didn't feel like this was, Hispanics beat their kids. You know what I mean? And other people don't. You know what I mean? I didn't feel picked on, but it certainly fit. And like I said, I like to see my people get a chance to shine.
Yeah. And I think too, for this, it was another instance where not only in the Russian episode, but in this episode too as well, the pool hall, the cockfighting. Yes. This is not Hollywood's LA. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. And it's very, very rough in terms of what you're seeing. But you know what? Honestly, the Hollywood that we got presented as kids was very gritty. It was, it wasn't, I almost feel like the whole we love LA, Showtime, Laker lifestyle stuff, that wasn't quite yet invented yet. Yeah. You know what I mean? The Hollywood had glitz and glamour, but I don't feel that people thought LA is a place of glitz and glamour back in the 70s. But if you recall, I don't know if it was in the second episode 20, the Russian one, or the one after it. Maybe it was the one of the baseball. Remember, Magic Johnson comes up as a Laker a couple. Yes. So they're kind of, and then, and the only reason I bring up the grittiness is just in 2-3 years, you have Beverly Hills Cop come out, right?
Yes, absolutely, yeah.
So that's quite the dichotomy between in 3 years.
It is. And this is the reality, is that you can see extreme wealth and extreme poverty living side by side. Yeah. Or it's a motivational poster, but it really is accurate, which is you've got the one person looking outside the bus window and sees a cliff, and the other one who sees a beautiful view. They're both on the same bus, but what they're seeing is their perspective is different. And I grew up in Pleasantville. I really feel like where I grew up and when I grew up, a very Goldilocks time.
Yeah.
But I never felt growing up that anything was closed off to me. You know what I mean? There wasn't like this. There were worlds that I was not familiar with, but not. Oh yeah, Carlos. Like class was not. It's like going, yeah. Oh, you could never do that, right? Yeah. I don't feel like I ever, unless it's dunk a basketball, and I'm thinking about physics. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like any boy could be president, kind of stuff. I feel when I grew up, that was realistic.
Yeah. I just think though, like especially when you're young, before the internet, you lived in kind of your little bubble, right?
Very much.
You come alive in high school.
Yeah.
And as I mentioned on this podcast before, since I went to Benilde, I went to people who I knew in Minnetonka or whatever, opposed to my whole world was St. Louis Park, right? I can still remember this instance, maybe just silly, is that I remember working at Minnetonka Country Club. Some guy ordered a grilled cheese, right?
Yeah.
And it had tomato on it. I'm like, my God, you can have tomato on a grilled cheese? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh.
And it was just some of these little things that you're just so.
That's a brilliant example.
That you're culturally unaware.
One of my favorite social media posts that's along those lines, which is somebody goes, "As an adult, you can just go to the grocery store and buy a birthday cake. Nobody checks if it's your birthday." You know exactly. What I mean? It's open to you. But I certainly, a place like, I use England as the example, but a class system is more, it's more a know your place kind of a society than, there are definitely people that feel and know your place in the U.S., and there are definitely people who feel like, oh, you may not see them, but there are class barriers that are preventing you. But that was not my experience growing up. My experience was the world was my oyster. How hard I worked. I did not feel like one LA or the other was my destiny. The gritty LA feels like the LA. Watching Barretta and Barnaby Jones and Mannix and Barretta, Starsky and Hutch. Any of those ones that those local cop shows, they had to have the seedy underbelly.
Yeah, and maybe it's more in the 80s where I would see things like Dynasty or whatever the show, overt wealth that's grotesque in one sense. I just remember being like, oh, my car wasn't working or something like that, and this lady's putting out her cigarette in an egg yolk, and I'm like, it's kind of a silly image, but it's in one sense a kind of dichotomy of who has money and who didn't. That was, I don't think it was that so much before that, but so it was good. So I think
solid episode. I want to give a shout out really quick to Mrs. Gomez.
Oh, okay.
I just like the actress's name, Carmen Zapata.
Ah, there we go.
And it was I shouldn't say it was a fun episode. It was a solid episode. Ken Reeves, once again, man, I want Ken Reeves as my coach, man. He rolls up his sleeves for his players and goes in and lets Mr. Gomez know that this isn't okay. In no uncertain terms, he lets him know this is not okay.
Yeah. Thanks, Carlos.
All right. Thank you, Joe.
I have to take a call. Here.
All right, my friend. Thanks, Joe. We'll talk to everybody next week.
Great, everyone, and to all of our fans out there, especially in France. Viva la France. I think that's our second biggest international one. So thanks again, Carlos. We'll see you next week.
Talk to you later. Bye now.
Bye.